Welcome to this explainer by Forge College. Today, we're focusing our technical magnifying glass on security audit methods and checklists. Now, in our last lesson, we built out emergency stop patterns and role-based access control. So you've built a pause switches, you've laid out the access gates, but let's be real, writing the code is really only half the battle. Now we've got to actually kick the tires. We need to systematically run these security audits and checklists to catch common, real-world failures before this code gets anywhere near a live deployment. Let's think about it like this. Imagine you're building a massive, high-speed roller coaster. You just engineered this state-of-the-art emergency braking system. Awesome, right? But would you load that ride up with actual people, send it down a massive drop, and then test the brakes for the very first time? No way! You'd aggressively try to break your own safety mechanisms in a completely controlled environment first. That's exactly what we're doing here. Our goal today is to take the somewhat intimidating idea of a security audit and turn it into a super manageable, step-by-step engineering process. So here's our safety inspector's checklist for today. We're going to hit the audit blueprint, the golden rules, your audit tool belt, real-world failures, the step-by-step workflow, and finally, actionable findings. Let's jump right in.
Starting with Part 1, the audit blueprint, where we look at specs versus code.
Okay, when you're auditing access control, you really have to split your brain into two layers. You can't just stare at the Solidity code and pray that a bug magically jumps out at you. You have to look for the gap between your expectation and reality. On one side, you have your specification. That's the expected behavior, your blueprint. It says things like, only the multisig can unpause the contract. Simple enough. But on the other side, you've got the implementation. That's the actual code sitting on the blockchain. And here's the secret. The highest priority vulnerabilities, they almost always hide right in that gap. If your design says one thing, but your code accidentally allows another, well, that mismatch is exactly what an attacker is going to exploit.
Moving to Part 2, defining the golden rules, or as we call them, invariants.
To find those sneaky mismatches we just talked about, auditors use a very specific term. It's called an invariant. Now, if you haven't heard that word before, just think of it as the fundamental laws of physics for your smart contract. You know, gravity always pulls things down, right? Well, an invariant is a rule that must always remain true, no matter what crazy edge cases or complex operations are going on. If an invariant is ever false, even for a split second, your contract is fundamentally broken.
So, what are the actual invariants for our access control and emergency stops? Well, first off, absolutely nobody without the correct role can perform a protected action. Zero exceptions. Second, roles cannot be accidentally granted through some weird backdoor. Third, when you revoke a role, it has to take effect instantly. No lingering access allowed. When we talk about emergency stops, if the contract is paused, all intended operations must be totally blocked. And finally, the power to unpause, that has to be severely restricted. You have to treat that pause flag like a safety-critical switch in a nuclear power plant. You literally need to track down every single function that reads or writes to it.
All right, Part 3, your audit tool belt. Let's crack it open.
So how exactly do we hunt down these underlying bugs? We generally rely on three main tools. First up is manual review. This is the classic tracing the logic line by line. It is absolutely essential for finding those logical flaws, intent versus implementation errors we mentioned earlier. You should always do this. Next, we have static analysis tools, like Slither. These automatically scan your code, and they're fantastic for early-stage checks, catching surface issues, missing visibility, basic reentrancy, that kind of stuff. And lastly, my personal favorite, fuzzing. Think of fuzzing like a highly energetic toddler just mashing every single button on your control panel in totally random sequences just to see what explodes. It is incredible for finding complex state machine violations that human eyes almost always miss.
Part 4, real-world failure modes. Let's look at where things actually break.
Theory is great and all, but let's talk about where these wallet machines actually crash out in the wild. A super common one is what we call role inflation at initialization. Picture this. You set up a flawless access control system, but your proxy's initializer function is left completely unprotected. So the person deploying the contract accidentally or maybe maliciously grants themselves permanent pauser rights right at setup, just because the initializer used a public access pattern without any limits. And suddenly, your deployer is holding this permanent, invisible key that can freeze your entire system. Remember, always verify those initialization paths.
Let's look at a slightly more complex exploit path involving governance. Say your emergency unpause is controlled by a time lock. Here's how it goes down. Step 1. An attacker somehow snags a minor proposer role. Step 2. Because your governance upgrade paths aren't aware of the paused state, the attacker submits a malicious upgrade. Step 3. They bypass the intended governance structure to unpause the contract prematurely. And step 4, they drain the funds. Boom, gone. This just goes to show how a fragile governance setup can completely undermine an otherwise perfect emergency stop.
We also see some other sneaky bypass vectors. A big one is low-level execute or batch functions. If you build a fancy low-level execution path for compatibility, but you forget to add that crucial check to make sure the contract isn't paused, your pause mechanism is basically useless. It's totally bypassed. And here's another massive operational nightmare: missing alert events. If your contract gets paused but there's no on-chain event emitted to provide context, your off-chain operators are flying completely blind. They have absolutely no idea who pulled the emergency brake or why. It's a mess.
Okay, moving to part 5, the step-by-step workflow, our audit assembly line.
So, we know the rules, we have the tools, we've seen the disasters. How do we string all of this into a professional, repeatable process? Here is your 5-stage workflow. Stage 1 is scoping. This is where you explicitly define your trust boundaries, map out what contracts are involved, and declare those invariants. Stage 2 is automated analysis. Run those static analyzers to sweep up the low-hanging fruit. Stage 3 is manual review. You sit down, you trace the logic, verify your role matrices, and brainstorm absolute worst-case scenarios. Stage 4 is fuzzing. Unleash that toddler to smash inputs and test your state machine under extreme pressure. And finally, Stage 5 is reporting, which brings us perfectly to our final major point.
Part 6. Actionable findings and next steps.
Look, an audit is completely useless if you just throw a massive pile of cryptic errors at the developers. To be efficiently fixed, every single finding in your report needs 5 specific things. 1. A clear title and severity level. Is this a critical emergency or just a low-level warning? 2. A plain English statement of the impact. What is actually at risk here? 3. Exact reproduction steps. I mean a literal step-by-step guide to triggering the bug. 4. Concrete remediation guidance. Tell them exactly how to fix it. And 5. Crucially, a validation test. You need a coded unit test that proves the vulnerability existed in the first place and proves that your proposed fix actually resolves it.
The ultimate golden rule of reporting is this: good findings are actionable. You state the impact, you show a reproducible path, and you provide a minimal remediation with a verification test. By sticking to this, we make sure that our fixes can be confidently integrated into the actual multisig design, which, by the way, is exactly what we'll be tackling in our next module, integrating security enhancements into multisig designs. The clean, validated fixes you produce in this phase are the direct inputs for that next step.
So I'll leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought. Your smart contract wallet has breaks, but have you truly crash-tested them? Now it's time to take these checklists, look hard at your codebase, and systematically hunt down those invariants. I highly encourage you to visit forge.college to dive deeper into these checklists, explore our other Web3 courses, and join a community of builders who actually take security seriously. Keep questioning your code, keep testing those edge cases, and most importantly, keep building securely. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I will see you in the next one.